Today, we're going to examine software engineers. They are the largest group in most development teams, so let's see who they are and what they do. This is Software Engineering Explained. Before we get started, please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the rest of the series. The engineers are the ones who are actually writing the code. They work closely with the tech lead to create new features and improve the existing code. For most people, engineers are who they think of when talking about any kind of software development. Most people picture young men in hoodies doing crazy things on laptops. This image often comes from TV, where the stereotype is seen. The reality is often not quite as simple. Most engineers are highly skilled professionals who happen to work with code in the same way that an accountant works with numbers and lawyers work with the law. So do try and talk to your engineers and ask them what they're doing and how it works. Most engineers will be happy to explain and show you what they're working on. And for the engineers out there, please don't try and show off by spouting back a load of technical jargon. It's not as impressive as you think. Now, because the engineers are such a large group, it can be helpful to break them down by role, such as back-end engineers, meaning they work with data and APIs, front-end, which means that they work on the user interface, full stack, meaning they do both front-end and back-end, although genuine full-stack engineers are very rare. Often they're experts in front-end or back-end and know enough of the other to get by. A lot of companies like to talk about full-stack engineers, but be careful, it can give you the wrong impression of what they're really doing. We have mobile engineers, which means they work on native Android and iOS apps. Desktop engineers, meaning they work on desktop apps on Windows, Mac or Linux. And DevOps engineers, meaning they work primarily on cloud infrastructure. In some organisations, DevOps engineers will be their own team, separate from the rest of the engineers. A DevOps engineer is an engineer of expertise in cloud and infrastructure as code. Now, there are other groups of engineers that you may come across, but for the sake of keeping this video short, we'll leave them out for now. But you may encounter other groups like data engineers, user experience engineers, prototyping engineers, but for now, let's not worry too much about them because they're fairly specialist, and in most organisations they'll mean something slightly different. Now, the roles are not really rigid groups that we can always place an engineer into. In most cases, engineers will cross from one area to the other throughout their career. In lots of cases, people will work across multiple areas just to get some work done. It's not unusual to see a front-end engineer helping out with some mobile development or a DevOps engineer doing a bit of API work, because if they've got the skills to do it, they can help get the projects completed. Like most professions, engineers progress from junior to mid-level and then into senior ranks as they take on more responsibility and more complex tasks. In larger organisations, you'll often also see graduate engineers who have just left university and are taking on their first roles in the industry. One of the challenges with engineering seniority is that it means something very different in every organisation. A common problem is that we see seniority linked to years of experience. A senior engineer is someone who's been successful in delivering projects and has experience in lots of different technologies and ways of working. This broad view allows them to use their experience to come up with ideas and approaches that might not otherwise have been thought of. A senior engineer always needs to be learning new things and wanting to expand their skills, considering architecture and other approaches. For anyone looking to step up to tech lead, that broad knowledge is critical. A common problem is that you see senior engineers who are people that have been in a single company for a long time and have therefore got a good understanding of the business and all the players. Their long time though with a single technology or way of working can lead to a very narrow point of view. It creates a dangerous culture in which senior engineers are looking to follow long established approaches while junior engineers are providing ideas that are falling on deaf ears. This can lead to stifling a culture of innovation that you may want to nurture, and longer term, a lack of respect will grow for the senior technical team as the junior team realise that they don't know enough about how to work in a modern world. If you see a high degree of turnover in your junior engineers, then have a look at the skill set in the senior team, because this will often be the cause. You may also encounter lead or principal engineers. These roles tend to be different in each organisation, but they are generally a technical manager who oversees an area with multiple teams. While the tech lead is managing a team, a principal or lead engineer will be setting out technical strategy and planning for the long term. Generally, lead and principal engineers are outside the team, so we won't talk about them in detail here, and we'll consider them in a future video. First of all, they need to be smart, but they also need to be resourceful, curious and creative. They need to know how to write code and how to solve technical problems, but the more senior engineers also need to be interested in the business benefits, the wider technical environment, and ways of improving the outcomes of a project beyond simply writing better code. They obviously do need to know how to write code. They might have a computer science degree, or they might be self-taught. In reality, it makes no difference. As long as they've worked with code before, they can learn a specific technology on the job given enough time. Team fit is vitally important, because any good agile team has to be self-organising, and the team need to be able to work together to improve their methods. Make sure that people in the team are able to work together, communicate well, and appreciate each other's point of view. One challenge that we often see is that a team can become dominated by certain individuals. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the best engineers, they just have a more domineering personality that makes it difficult for the team to gel and work together. That's something you need to watch out for, because being a good engineer is not just about how to write code, it's about how to work together as a team. Good engineers are not flashy or intimidating to talk to. They should be able to sit down with business stakeholders and discuss the technical side of a project in a professional and clear way. In the last episode, we talked about the tech lead being one of the first roles. For engineers, they come along when you're starting to build. The research and design has been done, the tech lead has provided some initial architecture so that you know the project is possible. Then it's time for the engineering team. As they join, that design and architecture will need to be reviewed with new ideas being incorporated. Engineers will want to start working immediately, so make sure you have environments and tools in place. If you're going to give them laptops, then have them ready. If they need access to certain tools or internal environments, make sure those are provided on day one, so that your engineering team can get going while the enthusiasm is as high as possible. You'll often hear a view from cybersecurity teams in particular that you only want to give engineers access to things that they really need. The reality is that this approach is often going to slow down a team, and you need to take it very carefully. Give your engineers access to all the tools and information that you can. If it's not particularly sensitive, then give it to them. It shows trust and is the most pragmatic way of getting going. Far too often we see teams building or buying things that another team in the company already has or have been working on, and it's because there's not enough openness, and that view of only giving people access to what they need leads to an environment in which people don't know that other things are there that they can ask for. Openness and transparency is the best way to get engineering teams working quickly. When it comes to production data, that might be a different story and you may need to be more careful, but for everything else, give your engineering team as much as you can. The day of an engineer will vary greatly depending on the organisation they work in, but it will normally start with some form of stand-up and status meeting. Here, they will discuss what they're working on and ask for any help that they might need. They'll discuss their approach with the tech lead and provide support for the testers if they need it. Then it's on with the day. The majority of time should be spent coding and working with other engineers. They may also attend planning meetings and retrospectives and other meetings that the project demands. In a well-run project, meetings should be kept to a minimum so that the engineering team can focus on their technical work. Throughout the day, the team should be working closely together to complete features and deliver value. The engineers are critical to your team, so support them and they will support you. They are smart, creative people, so their ideas may be the difference between success and failure. Try to give your engineering team as much tooling, technology, support and information as you possibly can, and they will pay you back with excellent work. Next time, we're going to look at testing and QA to see why they keep on breaking things.